Hey crew, it's Bit, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we're going to be getting back into Leviticus. I have delayed getting back into Leviticus for a while for a reason. I wanted to make sure that I was doing what I was actually supposed to be doing. And it has become abundantly clear to me once again that I need to do this. And I'm going to be, let's go ahead and get it out there. I hold unconventional beliefs. What I believe is not for everyone. If you are firm and secure and happy in your religion, this is probably not the Bible study for you. If you're looking for some great expoundment upon the laws, this is probably not the Bible study for you. I'm going to probably race through most of the laws because the laws are really kind of irrelevant to a large degree. We have already covered the important laws. We've already covered the will of God in most of the things that is going to be covered from here forward. It is a reiteration in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I don't do this to offend anybody. This is me showing the people who are searching for it how I came to believe the things that I believe. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I am not going to be converted by anyone. I will listen to new information in the comments, but do not be offended if I don't agree with your new information. There is a good chance that I have seen it, I have already considered it, and I've already dismissed it. I believe that everything from Abraham forward is pretty much wrong. It was implemented in accordance with the wrong entities. I believe that the entities are real. I believe that God himself is real. And I use himself very loosely because God is beyond a gender. God is beyond incarnation. And so there is really no he to God, but it is easy to use he. I'm getting all of this out now because we are going to be racing through a lot of this. I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground. If you don't know, like if you stumbled across me today, you can go back to Genesis and watch in real time as my views evolved going through this book, reading it aloud and seeing what it actually says without the glasses of a chosen people or a determined Savior. I don't believe that the blood of Christ was necessary for redemption. That is going to be very hard for some people to believe. I do not believe that there was ever a sacrifice required for redemption. And the Bible tells us that. We are going through that. I have shown a couple of examples already where that is true, and we will see more examples further along where that is true. And so, if there was never a sacrifice required, there was no sacrifice required on the cross. While I believe that that happened, and that even the resurrection is a real thing, and we will get into that later too. A lot of people are going to have a hard time with me because I do pick and choose. I do use discernment going through this book. Not everything is for us today. Some things were to change some horrible things into slightly less horrible things, and then again to another slightly less horrible thing. And we are to evolve into the will of God, and he will not allow anything to happen that is outside of his express will. So this is all part of that. This was the evolution of humanity into his will. But he told us in Genesis what we were to do. Go forth and multiply, subdue the earth, and shed the blood of no man. That's it. There was no required sacrifice for anything we were to do until Abraham came along. Until Abraham, there was no blood sacrifice required at all. We have gone through that. And so now we're looking at the establishment of the Levitical order. We're looking at the establishment of the deep state. Not necessarily this one group of peoples. This happened everywhere, right? The establishments of religions and the state merging in this manner. This is a very aggressive manner of them merging. Is the origins of the deep state control. I do not believe that any one ethnicity or group is responsible. I believe that there are multitudes of ethnicities and genders and all kinds of variables in the people who are behind the bad side of things, because the entities are real, right? The forces of good and evil are real, and the people who serve them, they are real. And so they make real choices. And any time, in my personal belief, any time that blood is a required thing, you're dealing with the wrong entity. I said all of that to chase off the people, right? If you're watching this and you're uncomfortable with any of that, this is not the Bible study for you. I am not here for the many. I'm here for the few. The people who are not satisfied with what they have learned. This path is narrow. This gate is small, and the morals are not relieved from you at all. I'm not giving you an easy way out. This way is tougher. You are not held to the law in the strictest sense of you shall not eat pork or you shall be an abomination. That is not the sense of the law. The sense of the law is much deeper than that. You love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And those are very hard things to do. If you do those things, you keep the law in its sum and in its entirety. If that makes you uncomfortable, this is not the place for you. This is a narrow path. Today we will be talking again in Leviticus. We left off in Leviticus 15. We're picking up in Leviticus 16. We're reading through this straight through. I am not, I add my commentary. I do. I talk about what I believe this is saying to me. And you are free to disagree with that. But I am reading what it said. I am just saying what we see here and what a literal translation of that means. I'm not adding in, but 2,000 years later, this is going to happen, so it's okay. Because it's not okay to sacrifice, right? It's not okay that blood is required from someone else to atone for something that you did. All God has ever required is a repentant heart. And so when you see it, it's a problem. I put off doing Leviticus. I have been putting it off because I don't like sowing division, right? If you follow Christ and his teachings and you literally do what he tells you to do, you're good. Now, if you proclaim that you follow Christ and you do the things that are opposite of his teachings, you're not. Whether or not you said a prayer, whether or not you believe you are washed in any bodily fluid, if you are not doing the things that you were told to do when you made that covenant, then you're not in the covenant. And so, Leviticus, the Day of Atonement. I said, we're back in this because things are heating up worldwide. There is a conflict between peoples going on right now that I believe is going to lead to a covenant with many. If you follow the Bible at all, then you know what that means. And I think we are seeing the beginnings of that. And this is the other side of that, the time that this signifies, the Day of Atonement, on the end of the scale is about to start, right? And so let's go ahead and get this out of the way now. I firmly believe that almost everything in Leviticus, while beneficial and useful, was to establish the priestly order of the Leviticans, the Levitical order, the people who must do the sacrifices, and therefore they don't have to raise the cows of the farms. People get to bring them the stuff and they get to kill it and eat it. It created a class above. This was the first separation of peoples from we all communally take care of each other, right? And then it got into a place of discord because populations got so large. And if you got two people, you got conversation. But if you got three, you got an argument. And so when you get a lot of people, you get a lot of arguments. Well, this was the division of, instead of everybody equally arguing, you had somebody to settle the arguments. You had somebody that was above everybody. They were held to a higher standard, supposedly. And therefore, they were representing God. And because they were representing God, they were set apart, they were above, and they had the control. They were the establishment of governmental controls. Now the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of two of Aaron's sons when they approached the presence of the Lord. And the Lord said to Moses, "Tell your brother Aaron not to enter freely into the most holy place, behind the veil in front of the mercy seat on the ark, or else he will die. because I appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Now, two of Aaron's sons, the chosen of God to go into the place, they did it wrong, right? And so because they did it wrong, they were consumed by fire, and they were changed fundamentally in a way that was detrimental to the people who carried them out. And what I mean by that is, normally, in the case of a death, the Levites were the ones assigned to go in there and take the bodies out. They were the ones that know how to handle the dead bodies. But they weren't allowed to do it because there was something about that body that was dangerous. And so they had to send somebody special to go get these bodies and pull them out into a special place to take care of them in a special way. And then they had to go through a special ceremony and waiting of time before they were allowed to come back and deal with people. I've talked about my theories on that extensively throughout Exodus and into Leviticus. I'm going to try not to get into them too much, but I believe that radioactivity and electromagnetism plays a large part into that. But they were drunk too. I'm not sure if we've already talked about that because it's been a few weeks or if that's coming up, but they were drunk and that's why. And they get a new law where they can no longer drink inside the tent. And this is how Aaron is to enter the holy place: with a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He is to wear the sacred linen tunic with linen undergarments. He must tie a linen sash around him and put on the linen turban. These are the holy garments, and he must bathe himself with water before he wears them. If you are unaware, that is a very good way to ground yourself from electricity. And he shall take from the congregation of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. And Aaron is to present the bull for his sin offering and make atonement for himself and his household. And then he shall take the 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And after Aaron casts lots for the 2 goats, one for the Lord and the other for the scapegoat, he shall present the goat chosen by lot for the Lord and sacrifice it as a sin offering. Now, you can say what you want, but choosing by lot is gambling. And you are leaving to chance which one to do. There's no particular way of choosing something. You're leaving it to the will of God through gambling. That comes in later in the book when they start talking about people gambling. And these religious societies, when they tell you that you're going to go to hell if you gamble. Remember that the priest here gambled about the scapegoat. But the goat chosen by lot as the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement by sending it into the wilderness as a scapegoat. And when Aaron presents the bull for his sin offering and atonement for himself and his household, he is to slaughter the bull for his own sin offering. Then he must take a censer full of burning coals from the altar before the Lord and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense and take them inside the veil. He is to put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the cloud of incense will cover the mercy seat above the testimony, so that he will not die. And he is to take some of the bull's blood and sprinkle it with his finger on the east side of the mercy seat, and then he shall sprinkle with it some of it with his finger 7 times before the mercy seat. All right, so we're sprinkling blood around. Y'all know my personal beliefs about blood, right? The blood is what cried out from the ground to God from Cain and Abel. The blood of your brother cries out from the ground. What have you done? Like, the power and the life is in the blood. You're forbidden to eat blood. But let's sprinkle it around willy-nilly. Like, I get it. It's ceremonial, right? You're not going to convince me of the argument. All right. So he shall make atonement for the most holy place because of the impurities and rebellious acts of the Israelites in regard to all their sins. He is to do the same for the tent of meeting, which abides among them, because it is surrounded by their impurities. No one may be in the tent of meeting from the time Aaron goes in to make atonement in the most holy place until he leaves, after he has made atonement for himself, his household, and the whole assembly of Israel. Then he shall go out to the altar before the Lord and make atonement for it. He is to take some of the bull's blood and some of the goat's blood, and put it all on the horns of the altar. He is to sprinkle some of the blood on it with his fingers 7 times to cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanliness of the Israelites. When Aaron has finished purifying the most holy place, the tent of meeting, and the altar, he is to bring forward the live goat, and then he is to lay both hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities and rebellious acts of the Israelites in regard to all of their sins. He is to put them on the goat's head and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man appointed for the task. The goat will carry on itself all their iniquities into a solitary place, and the man will release it into the wilderness. And then Aaron is to enter the tent of meeting and take off the linen garments he put on before entering the most holy place, and leave them there. He is to bathe himself with water in a holy place, and put on his own clothes. Then he must go out and sacrifice his burnt offering and the people's burnt offering to make atonement for himself and for the people. He is also to burn the fat of the sin offering on the altar. The man who releases the goat as the scapegoat must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water. Afterward he may re-enter the camp. The bull for the sin offering and the goat for the sin offering, whose blood was brought into the most holy place to make atonement, must be taken outside the camp, and their hides, flesh, and dung must be burned up. The one who burns them must wash his clothes and bathe himself with water, and afterward he may re-enter the camp. This is a permanent statute for you. On the 10th day of the 7th month you shall humble yourselves, and not do any work, whether the native or the foreigner who resides among you, because on this day of atonement will be made for you to cleanse you, and you will be clean from all your sins before the Lord. It is a Sabbath of complete rest for you, that you may humble yourselves. It is a permanent statute. The priest who is anointed and ordained to succeed his father as high priest shall make atonement. He shall put on the sacred linen garments and make atonements for the most holy place, the tent of meeting, and the altar, and for the priests and the peoples of the assembly. This is to be a permanent statute for you, to make atonement once a year for the Israelites because of all their sins. And all of this was done as the Lord had commanded Moses. Again, I think all of that, the entirety of it, is a ceremonial thing to bring about the establishment of the Levitical order, just to keep them in charge. I do not in any way, shape, or form believe that the goat who was released held the sins of the people. I don't. I absolutely do not believe that. I do not believe that the goat who was sacrificed held the sins of the people. They did. They fed their power into that, and therefore it worked for them. But I don't believe that that was a necessary thing. I don't believe that this entire ceremony was necessary. And I realize that that makes me an apostate, right? That makes me someone who's outside of the scope. But I still believe in the God. I just don't believe in the men. I don't believe in the man that wrote the book. People hold the book as if it was infallible. We have shown that it is not. It is inerrant. We have shown it is not. It is valuable. It is a guidebook. It will guide you where you need to be. Absolutely. Without exception. But if you follow it literally, today, if you follow the Old Testament literally, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. If you follow the New Testament, you're probably going to be in a lot of trouble. Peoples evolve. We come to better understandings, and you're only held responsible for the level of understanding you had. This was better than the system they had, and so they were held to the higher system. Christianity was a better system than they had, and so they were held to the better system. That's all I'm saying. This was establishing a better system for a people, and it worked. It did. I'm not saying that it was a bad thing to establish the order, but the way that it evolved and the way that it became probably was. Leviticus 17. And then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron, his sons, and all the Israelites, and tell them this is what the Lord has commanded. Anyone from the house of Israel who slaughters an ox, a lamb, or a goat in the camp, or outside of it, instead of bringing it to the entrance to the tent of meeting, to present it as an offering to the Lord before his tabernacle, that man shall incur blood guilt. He has shed blood and must be cut off from among his people. Only the priest can make your sacrifice. You require somebody between you and God. Make sure you remember that. Remember that you require somebody else to go to God for you. And if you don't, you need to be cut off from your people. You remember that. I might have to check on this cat in a minute, so let's run through 17. And for this reason, the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they have been offering in the open fields. They are to bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting and offer them as sacrifices of peace to the Lord. The priest will then sprinkle the blood on the altar of the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting and burn the fat as a pleasing aroma to the Lord. They must no longer offer their sacrifices to the goat demons, to which they have prostituted themselves. That's an interesting thing to remember there. Right? We have talked before about the regional demons, right? And the gods in the area and the people that they are coming out of, and the sacrifices they had and the things that they did. They are establishing new ones, which are better ones, but still a little bit terrible. And tell them that if anyone from the house of Israel or any foreigner living among them offers a burnt offering or a sacrifice, but does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord, that man must be cut off from his people. And laws against eating blood. This is what we was talking about a minute ago. If anyone from the house of Israel or any foreigner living among them eats any blood, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for your souls upon the altar. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Therefore I say to the Israelites, none of you may eat blood, nor may any foreigner living among you eat blood. And if any Israelite or foreigner living among them hunts down a wild animal or bird that may be eaten, he must drain its blood and cover it with dirt. For all the life of the flesh is its blood. Therefore I have told the Israelites, you must not eat the blood of any living thing, because the life of all flesh is its blood, and whoever eats it must be cut off. And any person, whether native or foreigner, who eats anything found dead or mauled by wild beasts, must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will be unclean until evening, and then he will be clean. But if he does not wash his clothes and bathe himself, then he shall bear his iniquity. Again, this is the establishment, like this is letting you know. This is what I was just talking about, the blood crying out. Now, when you eat meat, like you go to the store and you buy meat, right? And you cut it and it's got this red juice that comes out. That's not blood. That is a protein that is inside the meat. Very healthy stuff. It's good for you. The blood is drained. You don't get the blood normally in most of the things you get. Now, when you buy a chicken, there's probably some blood left over. Wash it off. Get rid of it. But it has mostly been drained. We don't, as a practice, eat blood. It may come from this, but there's a reason for that. Terrible things reside in blood. Cooking them and leaving them out even slightly causes some severe bacterial things, some severe things in your intestines, and it's pretty rough. There's a reason why most of the dietary restrictions are in place. It is to keep people safe for a large part. You're not going to be damned to hell if you accidentally eat shrimp, right? Because shrimp are dietarily restricted. You're not going to hell for eating shrimp, right? But if you eat shrimp, you can get very sick. That is a thing. Most of the laws have a purpose, but I don't believe that all of the laws are exactly a divine extension of God's will. I really don't. I don't believe that the minutia that we are detailed into very shortly is his express will. And this cat is going crazy. I'm going to go see what's going on, and I will be back with y'all in just a minute. Just a minute. All right, sorry, my cat needed in the room. Oh, now we're going to be diving into the minutia. It's important to remember that this was a different time and a different culture, right? Oh, we'll do this. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, I am the Lord your God. You must not follow the practices of the land of Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not follow the practices of the land of Canaan, into which I am bringing you. You must not walk in their customs. You are to practice my judgments and keep my statutes by walking in them. I am the Lord your God. Keep my statutes and my judgments. For the man who does these things will live by them. I am the Lord." So, the things that were going on in Mesopotamia at this point in time were a little bit wild, yo. We've already talked about how Abraham absconded from his father's lands with his sister and was thereby banished from them. So that direct relationship was already a taboo, but we're about to get a whole list of them because this was common practice at the time. Now, if you hold that everybody came from Noah, then biodiversity was awful and scarce for a short while at a minimum, right? We got it like 18 generations or so before it gets. Anyway, biodiverse enough to really sustain, you need a couple hundred people. So you're starting from very little resources. And so they were doing whatever with whoever. And now it is time for that level of understanding to change, for people to be held to a higher standard of understanding. You are no longer to do these things in particular. Let's run through them really quickly. And there's a point to be made on the backside of it. So, none of you are to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. You must not expose the nakedness of your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother. You must not have sexual relations with her. You must not have sexual relations with your father's wife. It will dishonor your father. You must not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same home or elsewhere. You must not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, for that would shame your family. You must not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife born to your father. She is your sister. You must not have sexual relations with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. You must not have sexual relations with your mother's sister. She is your mother's close relative. You must not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations with her. She is your aunt. You must not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife. You are not to have sexual relations with her. You are not to have sexual relations with your brother's wife. That would shame your brother. You must not have sexual relations with a woman and her daughter. You are not to marry her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter and have sexual relations with her. They are close relatives and it is depraved. You must not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is alive. You must not approach a woman to have sexual relations with her during her menstrual period. You must not lie carnally with your neighbor's wife and thus defile yourself with her. You must not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You must not lie with a man as with a woman. That is an abomination. You must not lie carnally with any animal, thus defiling yourself with it. A woman must not stand before an animal to mate with it. That is a perversion. Do not defile yourself by any of these practices, for by all of these things the nation I am driving out before you have defiled themselves. Even the land has become defiled, so I am punishing it for its sin. The land will vomit out its inhabitants. But you are to keep my statutes and ordinances, and you must not commit any of these abominations, neither your native born nor the foreigner who lives among you. For the men who were in the land before you committed all of these abominations, and the land has become defiled. So, if you defile the land, I will vomit you out as it spewed out the nations before you. Therefore, anyone who commits any of these abominations must be cut off from among his people. You must keep my charge not to practice any of the abominable customs that were practiced before you, so that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am the Lord your God. Okay. There's an awful lot contained in here. There's an awful lot of people that you are not allowed to have sex with. It was common practice to have sex with a lot of these people. It was not restricted at all for the Canaanites or the Egyptians, apparently, right? That's what's being recorded here. That it was common to approach anyone for sex. Let me repeat that. It was common to approach anyone for sex. And so you're being taken out of that and you're being set apart from that. But it's not telling you to only have sexual relations with your wife. It did not say that. It gives you restrictions on who you can take as a wife. It gives you restrictions on who you can have sex with. But it does not tell you to not have sex with anyone else outside of marriage. Where does it say that? If you enter in a covenant, then you are held to an extra set of restrictions. But those restrictions are a little bit weird here, because men are allowed to have more than one wife. You're just not allowed to have, well, let's get it in here, a woman and her daughter, and you're not to marry her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. Those are all close relatives. You must not take your wife's sister as a rival wife. Well, somebody should have let them know that previously, right? If that was a requirement of the Lord, then we should have already seen that one happen, right? But we didn't, and there was a reason for it. There's a reason why it's in here. They put in here this one, right? You must not lie with a man as with a woman. It's an abomination. And you can take from that what you want. I've already done my bit on Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah and what the true abomination that was happening there is. It doesn't restrict a woman from a woman. There's no restriction of that in this text, anywhere, because it was common. And you want to talk about throw a cultural revolution, throw the brakes on that real quick, is if you tell a man who has a couple of wives who all mutually enjoy each other that they can no longer do that, you're going to have a problem. And so you restrict one because nobody was really, like, it happens. Don't ever get that twisted. Throughout all of history, this has happened. If it didn't happen throughout all of history, that verse wouldn't be in here at all. But it was so rare that he didn't mind stepping on that toe. And therefore, starting the precedent that would come later for a whole lot of persecution. Now, I've given my beliefs. I don't believe that homosexuality is an abomination that is condemning you to the pit of hell. I believe that if you live a licentious life, right? So if you are a pleasure seeker who is merely having sexual escapades for the sake of having sexual escapades, then yes, you will be condemned for that. Not necessarily to hell, because that's a whole different argument, but you will definitely be held to account for that. Right? That's where I'm at on that. But if you are a committed person and you are in love with a person and that person happens to be the same sex as you, then God had a reason for that. You don't just wake up one day and say, you know what? That penis looks tasty. You don't. It doesn't happen. So all I am saying is that not every person who makes that affirmation, I guess would be the best way to put that, is honest in it. A lot of them are in it for the depravity of it. That is where the sin lies. The forcing of it upon another. That is where the sin lies. What you do with your genitals doesn't really matter. That is the minutia of the law. That is the problem with the law. That's why the law was summed up with love. Right? That's why he said, yeah, everything in this one basket real quick. And we will talk about that argument at a whole different point. But it was important to point out here that it was a common practice. Right? It's not an unknown thing for a man and his two wives to mutually do things. And that was very much left out of this. It tells you specifically not to have a woman and her daughter in your bed. And it tells you specifically not to have a woman and her sister in your bed. But why does it not say not a woman shall not lie with a woman? because it would have caused too much of a problem. And I know that's a hot take, right? I know that is a very non-standard interpretation of what we're doing. I am fully aware that you now consider me a heretic. I'm okay with it. This is discernment. This is not blind following. God called us to be discerning. Some things are truthful and honest and good, and some are not, even within the Holy Word. The commandments for holiness. Then the Lord said to Moses, speak to the whole congregation of Israel and tell them, be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy. Each of you must respect his mother and father, and you must keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not make idols or make for yourself molten gods. I am the Lord your God. When you sacrifice a peace offering to the Lord, you shall offer it for your acceptance. It shall be eaten on the day you sacrifice it, or on the next day. But whatever remains on the third day must be burned up. And if any of it is eaten on the third day, it is tainted, and it will not be accepted. Whoever eats it will bear his iniquity, for he has profaned what is holy to the Lord, and that person must be cut off from his people. Now, unless you take very special preparations in making your meal, by the third day it's no good, right? Especially with no refrigeration. Love your neighbor. When you reap the harvest of your land, you will not to reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You must not strip your vineyard bare or gather its fallen grapes. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. The love of money is the root of all evil. If you are stripping to the last resource, the land that is in your stewardship, then you are doing it wrong. And that goes for every single part of your life. If you have been given something and it becomes your exclusive, you are doing it wrong. If you're given a field and you take everything out of it, you're doing it wrong. You must not steal. You must not lie or deceive one another. You must not swear falsely on my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. I've gone through the commandments, right? You must not defraud your neighbor or rob him. You must not withhold until morning the wages due a hired hand. Now, our wage progression here, generally speaking, is hold back a week, right? Process and then pay. That's not biblical. Biblical is you get paid today for work today. But there wasn't like a 7-day payroll. There wasn't taxes. Well, there was taxes. But the payroll and all of that, it was different then. So, you must not curse the deaf or place a stumbling block before the blind. But you shall fear your God. I am your Lord. I pointed that out, like they must not withhold the morning wage or until morning the wages due, because as it stands, and like if we are to take this as infallible, unshakable, unbreakable, right? Then our 7-day pay period is an abomination to the Lord, and we're all condemned to hell for using it. You must not pervert justice. You must not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the rich. You are to judge your neighbor fairly. That's a big one today. Like, that one is so very big today because we have the internet of opinion and we have the court of popular opinion. And you can be accused of something today and convicted of it before anything is known about it. And that is a huge problem. That is a perversion of judgment. Right? You must not go about spreading slander among your people. You must not endanger the life of your neighbor. You must not endanger the life of your neighbor. Let's pop that out and look at that. I want to see specifically what the word is for life there, because it's highlighted. So the life. The blood, well, doggone it, what do you know? As from a wound. You must not endanger the blood of your neighbor. You must not harbor hatred against your brother in your heart. Directly rebuke your neighbor so that you will not incur guilt on account of him. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against any of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. That right there is the song, right? You are to keep my statutes. Hold on. This is water, but I need a drink for this. You shall not crossbreed two different kinds of livestock. You shall not sow your fields with two different kinds of seeds, and you shall not wear clothing made of two kinds of material. But not a jot or a tittle, right? Not a jot or a tittle will be cast away. So, what we have here, we are, without a doubt, in direct contradiction of this right now. We are, without a doubt, crossbreeding different kinds of animals. Right now. They are doing that in labs right now. With full government assistance and approval right now. You shall not sow your fields with two different kinds of seed. That's for cross-pollination purposes, I guess. But, so you can't have corn and wheat in your own field, on your own land? Well, what it's really meaning is you don't mingle them, right? Like, you don't plant corn and wheat in the same cast. You don't mix the seed and then throw them out and expect good things to come from that. That's not how that works. You have to be specific when you're planting. Corn is planted differently than wheat. Both are useful. Both can go on your land, but don't put them in the same spot. And you shall not wear clothing made of two different kinds of material. Well, most of mine is cotton, right? Like, I like cotton. But we have a whole lot of blends. A whole lot of blends. Well, according to this, you're going to hell. That is real, right? I say it in kind of a trite manner, but the literal interpretation is yes. If a man lies carnally with a slave girl promised to another man who has not been redeemed or given her freedom, there must be due punishment. But they are not to be put to death because she has not been freed. The man, however, must bring a ram to the entrance of the tent of meeting as a guilt offering to the Lord. The priest shall make atonement on his behalf before the Lord with the ram of the guilt offering for the sin he has committed, and he will be forgiven the sin he has committed. Set on that. So if a man lies carnally with a person owned by another person, then he's got to give him a ram. But not to the person, to the priests. When you enter the land and plant any kind of tree for food, you shall regard the food as forbidden. For 3 years it will be forbidden to you and must not be eaten, and on the 4th year its fruit must be consecrated as a praise offering to the Lord. But in the 5th year you may eat its fruit, and thus your harvest will be increased. I am the Lord your God. Now there are composting reasons for that, for the most part. Like, the first couple of years of a fruit tree is remarkably bare. You're lucky if in 3 years you're getting fruit on most fruit trees. And by the 5th year, you would probably have a decent harvest. But if you let the fruits fall and disintegrate, then you feed for a while the progression thereof. Like, the fruit is literally the things that it most needed to be able to grow. It's the calcium and the nitrogen, and all of the things stored in that fruit get released into the soil, and worms come and eat it, and bugs crawl over it, and animals poop. All of those things fertilize the tree, and by the 5th year, you probably have a decent harvest. You must not eat anything with blood still in it. You must not practice divination or sorcery. Now, we just saw an example of a Levitical priest using divination. Casting of lots is divination. You can argue if you want to. Prognostication is particularly seeing forward, right? That's what this word is. I'm going to pop these two out separately. It pleases you to say, I have divined that the Lord. There are many examples of divination being used. We are not supposed to enter into trances and try to determine on our own what will happen in the future. If you do, and you say things and you're wrong, you're supposed to be stoned to death. Right? You can take control of a people by talking about what is coming. That's a very, very important thing to know. And it is something that you can rest assured that the Levitical priests did know. And prophecy, in particular, holds a power, if done correctly, of both being fulfilled and not fulfilled equally well. If it is done correctly, anybody can slot in to a particular circumstance and get it mostly right. Or you can retroactively slot people in with attributes that they may not necessarily have represented. So it's easy to set a goal for somebody that this thing is coming a long way down the road. And if you pay attention to me, then the bad thing won't happen to you. Now let's look at sorcery, because we're getting close to wrapping up today's, and that is soothsaying, right? Diviner's crooning, nasal twang, hum of insects. To act covertly. Enchanter, soothsayer, sorcerer, practicing magic. There will be examples further on of witchcraft, but we have already had some in Exodus. We've already shown some particular spell crafting happening, right? All right, let's go ahead and start getting this wrapped up. You must not cut off the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard. I'm going to hell. You must not make any cuts in your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I guess I'm going to hell. I am the Lord. You must not defile your daughter by making her a prostitute. Now, that one I don't do. Or the land will be prostituted and filled with depravity. You must keep my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. I am the Lord. You must not turn to mediums or spiritists. Do not seek them out, or you will be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. The spirits and entities are real things. Don't seek out the people who frequent their company for a reason. Now, in this one, it might be particularly because it's going to upset the order that's already being established here. You are to rise in the presence of the elderly, honor the aged, and fear your God. I am the Lord. When a foreigner resides with you in your land, you must not oppress him. You must treat the foreigner living among you as a native born and love him as yourself. For you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You must not use dishonest measures of length, weight, or volume. You shall maintain honest scales and weights, and an honest ephah, and an honest hind. Those are units of measurement. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You must keep all of my statutes and all of my ordinances, and follow them. I am the Lord. Now we have only just begun to dig into the minutia of the law. There will be a lot more of these. I'm trying to run through the law as fast as I can because I want to get to the prophets and start talking about that stuff. Most of the things that we see here are merely to keep people in line. A lot of them are for safety reasons. A lot of them are to keep them from going down some pretty depraved paths. They have reasons behind them, but Leviticus is for the Levites. It is the establishment of an order of people. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I have issue with some of the execution that came from it. But you are free to follow what you wish to follow. I am not here to convert a single person. I'm here to go through this for the people who need it, who are already seeking something else. What they have been taught is not enough, because it is not enough. Lots of things are not right. As we go forward, it will get much more blatant that a lot of things are not right in this book. And just because you have the validation in your mind that this is coming later that will make that right, does not mean it was right. If you are God, then you have the power when you take the people from Egypt to set down the right law. You have the power to not require a blood sacrifice and not require a sacrifice. But instead, it unfolded the way that it did. Now, I believe that it unfolded the way that it did for a reason and a purpose. It's just not the same one that everybody else does. I believe that Jesus took up the yoke that was given to him voluntarily, and I respect and admire him for that. But his blood was not required for me to be free of sin. Me changing my heart to God was required for me to be free of sin. Me asking God personally, Dear Heavenly Father, I am a sinner. I ask you to freely free me from the sin that I have lived in. I freely ask you to forgive me for my sins, to change my heart for yours. If you say anything even remotely like that, and you mean it, and you do it, then you're good. There is no blood sacrifice ever required. None. That is a big deal to me, right? I am fine with you believing that it was. I can't get on board with it. I can't, right? I don't pray in the name of Jesus. I pray in the name of God because his will be done. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully, I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. It's getting more complicated by the day. The news prompted me to get back into this because what is happening over there is signaling some events that are going to happen. The bottlenecks are real. Like, what is coming from everybody believing that these things will happen is that these things will happen. If we are aware of what will happen, we can try to navigate things in the manner that we are instructed to. Because most people are not aware of what the instructions for the people are. We will get into that. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. Hopefully I am reaching the people that I need to reach. I'm not here for everybody. I know people are going to get mad. I'm not going to block you unless you get belligerent. I'm not going to argue in comments. I know what I know. I'm here to reveal what I know. I'm not here to be above anybody. I'm on an exact equal plane with everybody. There is no I'm holy. There is none of that. I'm just here talking about issues. Hopefully bringing a little bit of help to people. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. You're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.